If you go and look at the largest 10 cities in the United States from 1950 to 1975, 9 of them were actually losing population due to the fact that you had a big run up in property taxes. As a result of that, it put it in kind of a doom loop and people were moving out. Well, now property taxes have gone up and mortgage rates have gone up. And when you print money and you have inflation, asset prices go up and real estate prices go up. So homeowner affordability, it's hit an all-time low. They basically have the economics all upside down. If you are driving people out of the city and the real estate market gets weaker and weaker as you have fewer and fewer people, lower levels of economic activity, kind of a perfect storm. The thing is literally in a death spiral.
In the United States, we have very complex tax codes. Today, I sit down with Professor of Applied Economics at Johns Hopkins University, Steve Hanke, to discuss whether property taxes are unconstitutional. As the broker of record at Sachs Realty, I spend a majority of my day helping buyers achieve the dream of homeownership. And as a home buyer prepares to purchase a home, they become qualified for a specific monthly payment. In a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, their principal and interest payments stay the same for 30 years. However, homeowners must pay property taxes, and this annual cost doesn't stay the same. Property taxes typically rise year over year, and in many states, over the last several of years, property taxes have risen as much as 40%. There are many who believe property taxes are unconstitutional and that they should be abolished. So let's ask Mr. Hanke his opinion. Professor Hanke, sir, thank you for joining me again on our podcast.
Great to be with you, Todd.
In my introduction, I mentioned that you were currently a professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University. However, your roles throughout your entire career have been monumental accomplishments. You served on President Ronald Reagan's Council of Economic Advisors. You were advisor to 5 foreign heads of state and 5 foreign cabinet ministers. You were the president of Toronto Trust Argentina in Buenos Aires, the world's biggest performing mutual fund in 1985. And presently, you're considered to be one of the 3rd most influential economists in the world, according to Focus Economics in Barcelona. And I know recently you've been quoted as one of the most influential economists in Washington, D.C. So today we're talking about property taxes. And I know you've authored and co-authored many articles on this topic. And I'm really excited to dive in today. But before we do, I just want to bring up an article here that was published in the Washington Times on March 13th of 2023. And it was titled Property Taxes Unavoidable or Unconstitutional. And in this article by Joe Petrina includes the following opinion. It says, somehow we the people have forgotten the founding principle of our country, no taxation without representation. We have instead accepted with blind obedience the burden of unconstitutional property taxes levied upon us by our municipalities. But at first, I'd like to ask you, Steve, are property taxes unconstitutional by state?
Well, not as a legal scholar or practicing attorney, I can't really answer that with any authority. They by the way, they're obviously that was a polemical article, I think, that you're referring to. If they were unconstitutional, believe me, the Supreme Court would have had an opportunity to review those cases and make a judgment on them. But so my guess is they're perfectly constitutional, but whether they're good or not is something else.
So tell us your thoughts. I mean, that's what we want to talk about here today.
We're talking about property taxes in general, and the first thing to get in mind is that kind of the economic analytics of the whole thing, and let's assume that you raise property taxes. Well, what actually does that do? It number one, it reduces the free cash flow or net benefits that are being generated from the property every year, year after year after year. And the second thing that happens, since you have property that's a capital asset, you'll have something called tax capitalization that occurs. And if you take the present value of of the tax increase for the number of years that it's going to be with you and discount it back to the present, you get a number, and you subtract that number from the capital value of your property, and that is the tax capitalization hit that you get. So you get two things. You get this annual flow, the net is coming down, your free cash flow for free benefits annually are coming down. But the big thing is that your value of your capital asset, your property, is going down because of tax capitalization. So that's the nub of what's going on. Think of it this way: not only not only your income, your annual income's going down, but your wealth is going down. Your capital stock's going down. I mean, so it's a property taxes are a pretty big deal. And you and I, Todd, we're in Baltimore, and if you go back, let's look at the history of property taxes just a little bit. If you go back and look at the 25 years from 1950 to 1975, and the largest 10 cities in the United States, the nine of them were actually losing population, and a lot of it was due to the fact that you had a big run up in property taxes. And of course, this tax capitalization thing came in, people got their wealth taxed away with the property taxes. And as a result of that, it put it in kind of a doom loop in these cities, and people were moving out. So we're in Baltimore. So 1950 to 1975, 25 years, we increased the property tax rate 19 times in that 25-year period in Baltimore. And now it's at around 2.25%. It's the highest rate in the state of Maryland and all the counties. It's double the rate in the adjacent Baltimore County where you're actually. I'm in Baltimore City, and the property tax rate here is double what it is where you're seated in Baltimore County, the adjacent county. And as a result, of course, what you get is this huge decline in the property in the property tax base, because what happens is that you increase the tax rate, and that reduces a capitalized value or capital value of the property, and the tax base actually goes down. So you've got a rate and a base thing going on and working, and the rate's so high in Baltimore that it's really confiscatory at this stage, because and we're losing population at a pretty rapid rate. In the 2010s, we were losing 300 residents per month in Baltimore, and now in the 2020s we're losing 500. And this thing has been going on ever since 1950. By the way, Baltimore used to be one of the highest earning per capita cities in the United States, right up at the top, and that was World War II, right after World War II. Well, now the thing is literally in a death spiral, because what happens? The people leave, the capital values go down, and of course they keep the tax rate up, and it's just a sinking story. Now, some cities have turned around. Now, San Francisco, people won't realize this, but San Francisco in 1950 to 1975, it was just like Baltimore. It was actually losing population faster than Baltimore was losing its population. They had 17, not quite up there with Baltimore, We had 19 property tax increases. San Fran had 17. They were losing population big time. In 1978, there was something called Proposition 13 that was passed in California, and that put a cap of 1% of the property tax. That was a two-thirds of a reduction in where the tax had been in San Francisco. So the cap was a huge tax cut in San Francisco. And what happened? You had a huge boom started in San Francisco. And the revenue, by the way, what happened to the revenue? If you look at 1978, when the property tax was passed, the rate was here. Then I mean the revenues going into San Francisco municipality were here. They went down a little bit for 3 years, and then they increased. All of a sudden, they shot up on an inflation-adjusted basis by about 80%. So there was a huge turnaround in property values, meaning the tax base actually went up a lot, and the revenues with a much greater tax base and the lower rates, actually the revenues actually went up. This is kind of a version of the so-called Laffer curve, supply side economics. If if taxes are confiscatory and very high, what happens with the Laffer curve is that if you lower the rate, the actually the base goes up, and the total amount collected at a lower rate actually goes up. And that's what happened in San Francisco. Now, at about the same time, Boston had the same problem. Boston was tanking, like Baltimore, like San Francisco, like virtually all the big cities in the United States in that 25-year period, 1950 to 1975. 1980, they passed Prop 2.5 in Boston, and that cut property taxes. And what happened? Boom. Boston took off. So you have a perfect case study here. You have Baltimore, which, by the way, is as you know,
falling apart.
Baltimore is completely controlled by a Democratic mafia. The Democratic Party controls the city, pretty much the state too,
State.
but the city big time, and as a result of that, there have been no changes, just high tax rates, shrinking property tax base, and just a drain of population and economic activity. That was not the case in San Francisco. They turned it around with Prop 13 in 1978, and in Boston, it was Prop 2.5 that put the cap on, and they turned things around. So that's kind of a long-winded story of property taxes. But right now, the interesting thing is that we have something called real homeowner affordability. And the homeowner affordability, if you look at about the time Biden came in 2021, the affordability was, the index was about on 100. In other words, for the median income person, housing was just affordable. And what's happened since then? The thing's tanked. The affordability index that's covered by the Atlanta Fed keeps track of this. The Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank, that is. This thing is down to it's low. It's hit an all-time low. The affordability index now that's due mainly to a couple of factors. One is that, well, real estate's gone up. Now, why did real estate go up? The Fed started printing a lot of money, and we had as a result of that, we had a lot of inflation right after COVID. And when you print money and you have inflation, asset prices go up and real estate prices go up. So real estate prices zoomed after and we hit the monetary accelerator with the Fed. So So that's one reason affordability has gone down. The other reason is that property taxes have gone up and mortgage rates have gone up. So you've had three things going, kind of a perfect storm against people who want to buy real estate. It's gotten more expensive. The top line price of a house, the median values up quite a bit higher than it was in 2020. Of course, everything is higher. Everything, if you look at the consumer price index, Todd, it's up about 23% higher than it was in 2020. Well, real estate is also up considerably since then. So that's one factor. Second factor, property taxes are going up. And the third factor, of course, if you want to move to and change location, you're going to have to take out a new mortgage, and that's going to cost you a lot more than the one you're paying right now. So that's kind of the at 30,000 feet anyway, the real estate picture, and there are a lot of local property tax revolts as a result of this affordability thing that I was talking about. People are annoyed when they get their property tax bill, and there are quite a few local property tax revolts going on. And I think the best way to solve the problem is put these caps on. By the way, that's one thing that's happening in Baltimore. I can report there's been a something called Renew Baltimore, and Renew Baltimore now has enough signatures. They've obtained enough signatures to put on the ballot a potential change in the city charter. And that city change would be to roll back these property taxes. That's what Renew Baltimore is all about. The only way you can renew Baltimore, the necessary but not necessarily sufficient condition, is to change the city charter and take that 2.25% property tax rate and wind it down. Get it down closer to 1%, which is a rate in the county.
Yeah, well, there's so many vacancies in Baltimore City. I mean, the tax bill, the same with the water bill. I mean, I think if the way it's structured right now, they went from quarterly water bills in Baltimore City to monthly water bills. And I think right now you spend about $30 or $35 if you never turn the faucet on. And, I had a lot of property in the city. I've since sold everything in Baltimore. 2021 was my last, 4 houses that I sold. And, it was crazy because, I would go on and look at, who's paid their property tax bill or who's paid their water bill. And literally I was the only one in a block or in a street in a lot of cases that paid their bills. And, so it is crazy. And, property taxes and I get a lot of calls from home buyers, especially over the last, couple of years where their escrows have really gone up a lot, and it has to do with property taxes. And of course, there is a homestead tax credit, and I think in all 50 states, maybe they offer this, but the issue is, they have this, they look on the tax record of a house that they bought that hasn't transferred in 10 or 15 or 20 years, and it's taxed at a certain rate. And then, of course, they buy the house at a much higher price, double in a lot of cases, and they're really not prepared for the additional increase with their payment. You've authored, like I said, articles, and one of the issues that I think you have with the assessed value or the appraisals is you're not really happy with the way things are really handled with that or calculated. But property taxes in the U.S., I mean, they were said to have originated during the colonial times. But back in, I think it was 1796, we had 15 states. 14 of those states taxed land. Delaware did not tax land. And today, Delaware has one of the lowest property taxes, just so happens to be where Mr. Biden is from in the nation. That's some of the cheapest property tax in the nation in Delaware. But all 50 states in the District of Columbia levy property taxes at a local government level. the cities, county, and school districts. So maybe you could talk about, you authored an article that said tax appraisal in evolving industries, and a word that I've never heard, econometric approach. So maybe you could just kind of tell us, do you disagree with the way that property taxes, we all disagree on how the money is spent. But do you agree or disagree with the way that we value properties in the first place?
Well, that's, one of the first jobs I had when I was a student at the University of Colorado was appraising property, not for tax purposes, but for purposes of appraisal for sale. So I spent this is when I was an undergraduate. This is many moons ago, but it turns out a very influential professor who became quite a close friend, actually, Maurice A. Unger. He at the time, the best selling real estate book, Principles of Real Estate book, was, I think it was just, the title is Real Estate, and Unger was the author, and he was involved in a lot of real estate activity, and I was the grunt doing the appraisals. So and I think I was doing a pretty good job of appraising, but that was for purposes of market activity. It wasn't for purposes of taxes. And my sense is that this is highly variable depending on what locale you're in, the appraisal. So that is an issue. But the one thing that isn't an issue is the rate. We know what the rate is. That everybody knows that. It's transparent and so forth. What we really don't know is how, if it's supposed to be an appraisal at fair market value, there's a lot of variability around that fair market value for appraisals depending on where you're located. So that is an issue. That's an issue, but one that really I don't have anything to say about it, except it varies from place to place.
How are they collecting or coming up with the tax percentage?
Well, they're coming up in a fairly arbitrary way. That Baltimore case study from 1950 to 1975, they just wanted more money, and the assumption was, oh, all we have to do is raise the rate. If we want more, the government was spending, the Democratic machine was spending more money. Okay. And so where do you get most of the money in Baltimore? You get it from property taxes. And the conclusion was, if we're spending more and we want to balance the budget, we have to have more tax revenue. And the only way to get it is just increase the rate. But the thing that they never figured out was this kind of Laffer curve effect, and that is, yeah, they assumed the base would remain the same, and the base didn't remain the same. As I said, there was tax capitalization, so the base automatically goes down if you raise the rate, and if you are driving people out of the city, and the real estate market in general gets weaker and weaker as you have fewer and fewer people, fewer and fewer jobs, lower levels of economic activity. The all of a sudden the property tax base goes down on you. And as a result, you're actually collecting less money at a higher rate than you were collecting at the lower rate. But bingo, 19 times, almost every year, they were increasing the rate. And you say, how do they determine that? They just wanted more money, and they stupidly thought that the base was static and wouldn't change, and they could just squeeze more money out of the static base. Well, the static base was turned out to be a shrinking base. And so the rates, they weren't collecting more. So what did they do? They just double down and increase the rate some more. And you're in kind of in what they call a doom loop.
But wasn't the purpose of property taxes for schools and roads and fire departments and things like that? I mean, for a local municipality, I mean, they're really not taxed at a state level, right? I mean, isn't it really the property tax? I mean, wasn't it really supposed to be more for?
It's a local. This again depends on what state you're in and what city, but generally they're local. They're for municipalities and municipal finance.
But aren't they responsible for fiscal reporting to say, hey, this is? I mean, is there any community input that is involved with, hey, this is what the costs are, what the needs are?
Well, yeah, but if you again in some place like Baltimore, you have again it's controlled by the democratic machine.
They just do whatever they want.
So people don't, in a sense, there's no political competition. So you don't have a strong opposition political party that says, this is not a good idea. These taxes are way too high. If you had political competition, and I was running for office and I had a good chance of becoming elected on a campaign that was to reduce the property tax. But if I wasn't a Democrat in the Democratic Party, I would stand no chance of winning. There's no one carrying the banner of tax reduction. That's why the Renew Baltimore effort is so important, because there will be a vote to change the city charter so people can directly vote. They won't be voting for a representative, and that representative is going to do whatever the representative wants to do. They're going to be voting directly to change the city charter to include a tax rollback. So you can have different kinds of elections. One is you can have representative democracy where you're voting for a council person. And the problem is the council person in a place like Baltimore, they're always from the same party with the same mantra, and that's to keep the tax where it is. And their argument is, oh, we can't reduce the taxes because that would reduce the revenue received by the municipality, and we'd have to cut back city workers. Well, they've got it all upside down. If you reduce the taxes, let's say you cut the tax in half, the property tax base would go up, the city would start booming again, you'd stop losing population, and you'd probably increase the revenue coming in. So they basically have the economics all upside down. But that's what they believe in, and there's no competition. So direct democracy is the city charter change with the Renew Baltimore. There'll be a direct vote where you can cast your vote for either no change in the property tax or a rollback.
So what does Brandon Scott say about that?
They're very reluctant to go the city charter way. The establishment opposes this. If they were for it, they would roll it back themselves. Why would you need a change in the city charter to reduce property taxes? They increased the property taxes one after the other, and basically destroyed the property base in Baltimore, as well as a vibrancy of the economy. The main hit was the property tax. That's my argument. And most of the work, by the way, I've done, I should mention, virtually all the work I've done on this issue is with Professor Steve Walters, who's been very much involved in the Renew Baltimore campaign.
Yeah, he's with Loyola, right? And he a professor.
Well, he's retired from Loyola. He's with me at my institute at Johns Hopkins.
Gotcha.
Johns Hopkins Institute for Applied Economics, Global Health, and the Study of Business Enterprise. So Walters is a fellow there now, and of course a longtime colleague of mine. But he's he's carried a lot of heavy water in this tax work that we've done in Baltimore and in general.
I think, and I could be wrong on these exact numbers, but I think I purchased one property in Baltimore for 45,000, and a couple other properties for 50,000 a piece, and I was paying over $4,000 for each one of them in annual property taxes. I mean, it was. I think that was the numbers. It was crazy, but anyway. You had mentioned about you were running for office, political office, and you had said that if you weren't a Democrat, being in this blue state of ours here in Maryland, what did you authored and co-authored with Stephen a article for the Washington Post. It was one of your opinions that Larry Hogan can revive Baltimore. Of course, he was a Republican, or at least some people don't believe that, but he was in the Republican Party, and your article and your opinion said Larry Hogan can revive Baltimore just as his dad revived Prince George's County. What happened? I mean, do you think that Hogan did a great job for Maryland? And number one, and number two, do you think that helped Baltimore City at all? Because a lot of people like Brandon Scott say that he did nothing for Baltimore City.
Well, our point in that article, just to make clear, that the in Prince George's County, his father, Hogan's father, was running the show there, and he saw the light, and he reduced property taxes in Prince George's County, and they had a boom. So our message was, Governor Hogan, do what Dad did. Try to get some property tax rollback in Baltimore, and that would be the best thing that you could possibly do for the city. It didn't happen.
They're supposed to take in order to come up with the tax rate. From my understanding, they take all of the values of the home. So, I mean, you could even break this down on a street level, right? I mean, you have a tax assessor that runs around, follows the permits, which is a lot of reasons, people are reluctant to do home improvement projects and pull permits because they're, following the tax assessors, following that very closely. They're banging on the door, wanting to come inside and see your project. And they want to know, of course, how much you're spending on the project so that they can assess you more money. But they're to take all the houses in the neighborhood, the street, and the municipality and assess all their values and put them all together and clump them together. And then really determine what are the costs of the municipality on an annual basis. And then they divide that and they come up with this tax basis, right? Or this percentage of tax. And that's why I asked you about, what your opinion was of these assessors. I mean, do you think do people have a chance to fight these assessors? I know when the new tax assessments roll out and the phased in assessment, I think there are states that have 3-year assessments or phased in value or phased in assessments and 4-year phased in assessments. I mean, what can people do? I mean, is there any?
You can appeal, your property tax assessments, but this is a pretty difficult road to go down. I've observed this in one case in particular in Cecil County, and it's been a nightmare to get a fair assessment on a piece of property that I'm very familiar with, and appeal after appeal after appeal, and clearly in this case that I'm talking about, which I won't name the property or the owner, who happens to be a very accomplished economist, by the way. There's clearly some fraud involved in the thing. So when you're talking about fair assessments, lots of things can happen. And if they're bad, if you think they're bad, and you do want to appeal, which everyone does have the right to appeal, my judgment is that this is difficult. To win an appeal is difficult. The the game's kind of stacked against you. Let's put it that way.
Let's talk about, and I know there was a lot of that in when we had the GFC in 2008. There was a new business that was spawned out of that, and it was, companies that were being established to fight on your behalf to reduce your property tax, and then basically their fee was, however much they saved you in your property taxes, what became, what they would charge you, based on that. And I remember getting cards in the mail and having clients back then getting cards in the mail saying, "Hey, property values have dropped. Let's fight these values." And actually, in Baltimore City, my property value or property tax did go down on multiple properties. I'm thinking all properties. I think I forget what year it was, but let's talk about the trickle down effect that you talk about because I'm really kind of focused on how this money gets spent. You wrote an article. It's been quite some time ago about trickle down economies, or trickle down economics that give ways to underserving rich with few benefits reaching the poor. In truth, you wrote, trickle down best characterizes the economic development policies pursued in deep blue states like Maryland, where taxpayer dollars flow to the politically connected amid grandiose claims of stimulative effects. Are we still seeing a lot of that today? I mean, you wrote that article about 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. Where does the money get spent in some place like Baltimore? I mean, it's waste, fraud, and abuse. You were talking about the water system, which I have studied in great detail for many years in Baltimore, as well as the wastewater system, and 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 we have wastewater plants that are dysfunctional. They won't even work in Baltimore. Back River plant, which is one of the biggest plants, has been taken over by the state. The state has to run the thing and be responsible for it because the city that has this very high tax rate and revenue coming in, it's so incompetent they can't run the thing properly. They literally can't keep the thing running. Now this is the wastewater plant that we're talking about. And you have on the water supply side, you've had these horrendous, I can't remember the numbers right now, but bills going out for tens of thousands of dollars for a water bill. So this gives you some idea of what it's basically a dysfunctional municipality. In other words, the property tax rates are high. The property tax base is shrinking, the population shrinking, uh, and what happens? The only thing growing is a city government. So
What's the answer? I mean, what do we do? I mean, you wrote an article, notable and quotable blame taxes for Baltimore's rot. I mean, what happened?
I think the most promising thing is change in the city charter. That's the only way to do it because there isn't any political competition. So you can forget that. There's one party that has a monopoly on running the city, and they're going to call the shots, and that's the end of that. So this is what happens when you don't have competition. The same thing as in the business world. If you don't have competition, you end up with what we call a monopoly or somebody with monopoly power, and they're going to gouge you. So that's why you want things like free trade. The best way to ensure competition in the economy is to have free trade, because if you have some domestic company that's squeezing you, what happens? Some foreign competitor will come in and undercut the squeeze. By the way, we're going in the opposite direction in the United States. We've had both the Trump administration and now the Biden administration's even worse, trying to cut off foreign trade as much as they can. That means you're cutting off competition, and that is bad. That because people are going to pay more than would otherwise be the case. Keep it in simple terms. We don't have to go into an economics classroom go through the analytics of the thing. It's just if you cut off international trade, you're going to be cutting off your nose to despite your face, because you're going to pay more for whatever it is.
Yeah, ABC News reported recently that some states are looking to end property taxes. In fact, there's a YouTube video on it. I'll drop it in the show notes. But some say that that if they do eliminate property taxes or cut property taxes, that they will only raise their state sales tax, and income tax will actually go up. And I know a lot of our income tax, if you're in a state where the state taxes your income, typically it's broken down based on the county or the city that you live in. So there's a state tax and then a county portion. I know, for example, like in Howard County, it's like 13%, 8% to the state and 5% to the county. But states like Idaho and Michigan might end property taxes altogether. And, and a lot of states, Steve, the average property taxes nationwide has spiked about 26% since 2019. This is per CoreLogic. And in states like Kansas, it said that property taxes have risen nearly 40% in 5 years. I mean, what are they going to do if they obviously we have no fiscal responsibility in government spending. I mean, there's no, what they spend money on, and the way that they waste money. I mean, this trickle down economics article that you wrote talked about, basically back then they were funding these different projects and spending hundreds of millions of dollars on them. What really is the answer? You say the city charter, that kind of thing. But how do we make things more affordable for homeowners?
It's very easy. You put a cap. We went through. We've had since 1978. Proposition 13 has been in place in California, and you have a cap.
But people are leaving California
at 1%. So you cap it.
They're flocking from California.
Same thing in Boston. They had Proposition 2.5. You put a cap. In the state of Oregon and the state of Washington, they put caps.
But you take a state like or take a city like Boston, it's 9x the median income to buy a house. So I mean, they cap the property taxes, but yet it's one of the least affordable in the nation to own a house.
That's true, but it isn't. The property values are just based on what's going on in the market in those places. The places are booming. The real estate market's booming. Same with San Francisco, but it isn't the tax man who's crushing the. I can make something unaffordable by increasing the tax. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a vibrant economy, and basically not housing isn't keeping up. The supply is keeping up with the huge demand in those places, and as a result, even on an inflation adjusted basis, the prices of real estate are going up. Now, some of that, by the way, is also due to other things like building codes and zoning codes. That you say, well, why aren't they building more houses to keep the supply keeping up with the demand in those regions that are growing rapidly? And in many cases, it's because of building codes, which it's like a tax. If you have a building code that increases the cost of building a house by, God only knows how much, it goes through the roof depending on where you're at.
Yeah, 40%.
What if you're in some place like that's very attractive, like Boulder, Colorado, where the University of Colorado is located? Well, they basically have just pulled up the drawbridge. They say we don't want any more houses being built here. It's bad for the environment and so forth. So when you look at real estate, there are lots of things going on, and a lot of them do revolve around government policies. And this affordability thing, the big things now, property taxes, that's been a problem. The inflation aspect, which I mentioned, that's been a problem. The zoning restrictions, that's been a problem. The building codes are a huge cost, a lot of it for pretty much nonsensical code mandates that have been put in over the time. Now, who does that? Well, the politicians do it.
Special interest groups,
Special interest.
lobbyists, right? Getting their products in, in the, specs. If you change a product, an exterior sheathing product, and the company makes this exterior sheathing, and they mandate that you need to, increase your energy efficiency in the home. These products are coming at high premiums, high costs.
Absolutely, and even the nature of competition and so forth is different because each location is unique. I mean, they don't make them anymore. Location A is A, and so it is unique in a way. Now there is competition because there are locational alternatives, but they're not really quite the same as A.
That's true, and they're not, and they won't relax any of the environmental, and not that it would destroy things. I mean, all you have to do is go up in a helicopter. You can see how much green space we have in this country, but we need to loosen up some of these land regulations to allow more density in, like you said, in certain areas. I mean, it's not just the fact that they are, enforcing these regulations that aren't practical for affordability purposes. I mean, people don't have the money to buy them.
At least at the national level, and of course with real estate it gets tricky because it's all local, but if you look at the national numbers, there's a huge backlog of in the housing industry. That's why home builders, I've always liked home builder the stocks because they're way behind. And why are they way behind? Why is this backlog of building houses in there? It's getting the permits and the permit process. It just holds everything up. So those are all things that would be desirable to get changed, but you've got to go to every single locality and get things changed, and it's not all that easy.
Yeah. What you as we kind of wrap up here, any predictions? I mean, on administration, you think we're going to have a change in November, or you think we're going to have 4 more years of the same?
I think the election, it's a little bit like flipping a coin and call. You think I'm going to be calling whether it's going to be landing heads or tails?
Yeah. No thoughts one way or another.
No, I don't have any thoughts one way or another. I think it's extremely difficult to tell. There's a just on a variety of levels. So I'm not in the business of calling the coin flips.
Yeah, you're not a referee. Well, Steve Hanke, I really appreciate you coming on and kind of dissecting these issues that we have with property taxation, and hopefully, like you said, we'll get somebody that will have some common sense running Baltimore City and other cities around the country to stimulate some growth and cut some costs.
I would say the idea of having somebody with common sense running the thing, forget it. It's not going to happen.
Okay.
You must. This is the key point. The key point is that you in a place like Baltimore, if you have a machine running the city and having a monopoly grip on the thing, you have to have not representative democracy. You have to have direct democracy where you vote to change the charter. And if you change this charter, meaning the constitution of the city, you can do things like roll back excessive property taxes, and that's what Renew Baltimore is all about. So you don't go to the politicians. You've given up on the politicians. They're not going to change anything. They're going to keep Baltimore in a death spiral.
Got it.
They've been doing it year after year after year. They haven't changed anything, and they won't change anything. But if with Renew Baltimore, you go to the ballot box and you're not voting for a representative in an indirect way to represent your interest, you're voting directly for your own interest, and that is, I want some property tax relief, and the only way I can get it is by changing the city charter. So that's the route.
Well, hopefully everybody votes for that.
Absolutely. Fortunately, they were successful in rounding up enough signatures to get this thing on a ballot, and we'll see what happens with the voters.
All right. Well, we thank you for your time, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Okay, great to be with you, Todd.
Thank you so much. Talk
Okay.
soon. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for making it to the end. If you haven't already subscribed to Sachs Realty's YouTube channel, please consider doing so now and hit that alert bell. You'll know every time we upload content just like this. And if you like the video, you can let us know by smashing that thumbs up. And you could also share your thoughts and comments on today's show below. As always, one of the biggest compliments that you can do for me here at Sachs Realty is to share this video with your family and friends. It'll help us build our online community together. See you next time. Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.